Hello, I'm Zelenskyy and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Yes, the grandeur of Great Russia, where nuclear threats flow more freely than clean drinking water, and rhetorical missiles are launched daily from the plush studios of state TV. Vladimir Solovyov, the self-appointed herald of the empire, has once again proclaimed, "Who dares to demand anything from Great Russia? If anyone has a problem, our Comrade Tsar will send nuclear missiles."
Понимаете, сама формулировка «президент Трамп выразил неудовольствие». Кому? Вообще сама формулировка. Великой России кто-то высказывает какое-то недовольство, это их проблема, а не наша. Даже когда некто, президент Финляндии Ступ, заявляет, что Россия должна согласиться, кому должна? Очень сильно все вокруг расслабились. Вдруг решили, что, минуточку, вчера Америка с нами воевала, а сегодня вот сейчас с самвона нас будут поучать и будут недовольны комментариями. Нет такой подлости, на которую Запад бы не пошел, чтобы уничтожить Россию. И теперь высказывается недовольство через губу. Они должны дрожать от одной мысли, если наш президент выскажет недовольство. И что за этим последует? Напомню, что Россия обладает самым могущественным и самым современным арсеналом стратегического вооружения, который может решить проблему любого недовольства с колоссальной скоростью.
Such bravery, such boldness, truly inspiring, especially coming from a man who, of course, has absolutely nothing to fear himself. While Russian conscripts are being shipped off to the front with rusty rifles and a prayer, Solovyov's biggest concern is probably whether his wine cellar in his Italian villa is still properly ventilated, even if the villa itself is currently under lock and key. But let's not nitpick. This is the textbook strategy of a decaying empire. When you can't offer your citizens functioning infrastructure, reliable healthcare, or even indoor plumbing, simply promise them Armageddon instead. Who needs decent roads or modern hospitals when you've got intercontinental ballistic missiles to point at the West? The beauty of this whole farce is how predictable it's become. The Russian elite lives in a parallel universe, one when war is a distant spectacle, waged by the poor, the desperate, and the disposable, while the warmongers themselves sip imported champagne and rehearse the doomsday speeches from safe, undisclosed locations. In short, it's a grand opera of nuclear bravado performed for an audience that's too cold, too hungry, and too exhausted to even care. And the lead tenor, Mr. Solovyov, is belting out his part with all the passion of a man who knows he's never going to hear the sirens himself. Now today we're gonna tell you a fairy tale, The Missile with a Mind of Its Own, by US Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink. And believe it or not, this story actually does have a happy ending of sorts, at least for the facts, if not for the victims, showing how pressure actually makes sense. Okay, so imagine hearing this extremely unpleasant bedtime story, something like this. Once upon a time, there lived a ballistic missile that bowed to no kings or masters, and so it was that one day the missile thought, "The world has enough of this joy and happiness. I wish to become the fire raining from the skies." And so it did. Charming, isn't it? Because this is what they do, missiles, right? They just fly to different places and go boom. Surely no human agency is involved there, right? And honestly, this is essentially what Ambassador Brink seemed to say after the missile strike on Kryvyi Rih. Here is the actual quote. "Horrified that tonight a ballistic missile struck near a playground and restaurant in Kryvyi Rih. More than 50 people injured and 16 killed, including 6 children. This is why the war must end." No mention of who actually fired the thing. It was just there, right? And wouldn't you know it, This fairy tale was a real box office bomb, worse even than Snow White. It's almost as if the ambassador said, "Disney, hold my beer." President Zelenskyy took exception to the neutral language of the statement almost immediately after it was made. And it's time for a quote from President Zelenskyy. Such a strong country, such a strong people, and such a weak reaction. And honestly, in saying this, President Zelenskyy has come out as a true master of understatement and restraint. Remember how some TV channels stubbornly refuse to call Hamas a terrorist group even though Hamas is officially designated as such by numerous governments? Are we doing a different kind of political correctness now because we don't want to hurt Moscow's feelings ahead of peace talks? Stepping on eggshells again, like with the whole tariff debacle, Ukraine gets slapped with 10% trade tariff, but Russia doesn't, because as White House Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett said, there is obviously an ongoing negotiation with Russia and Ukraine, and I think the president made the decision not to conflate the two issues. Now, I guess the US ambassador didn't want to conflate the issue of missiles killing civilians in Ukraine and the issue of Russia firing the said missiles. After a while, however, and no doubt inspired by President Zelenskyy's reaction, the ambassador did make a new statement. Not only did she express her sympathies towards the victims of the missile, but also actually said who fired the atrocious thing. And, spoiler alert, it was Russia. Who knew?
Вчора ввечері і сьогодні багато хто у світі заявив про свою позицію після цього удару, позицію чіткого несприйняття російського терору. Всім, хто це бачить і не заплющує очі, а говорить чітко і ясно правду, не тільки ми в Україні, а весь світ має бути вдячним. Замовчувати те, що це саме Росія вбиває дітей балістикою, це неправильно, це небезпечно. Це тільки підбурює покидьків в Москві. Продовжувати війну та надалі ігнорувати дипломатію.
Was President Zelenskyy right to complain? Absolutely. Otherwise, we'd have to add the facts to the list of casualties of the Russian missile strike, which would be a shame, especially since Putin is evidently leading us up the garden path, with all the talk of wanting a ceasefire. If you want a ceasefire, then how about, incoming pro tip, not firing your ballistic missiles at civilians? Of course, Putin might finally push Trump's patience beyond breaking point, and recent events show that Trump can be trigger-happy if he wants to. Ask the Houthis. Or, in terms of the economy, ask literally everyone, including the infamous penguins that have become such a cliché in the world of political memes. Thing is, it would be preferable if Trump's righteous ire came without more Ukrainian civilians breathing their last breath, and without the truth being smothered beneath layer upon layer of Russia-friendly political correctness. The ever-creative rhetoric of the Kremlin's favorite political scientists. According to military expert, read professional Kremlin parrot, Mr. Sivkov, denazification in Ukraine apparently means not just going after supposed ideological Nazis, which in Russia's book is anyone who dares to love their own country, but also, and here's the charming twist, their children, their families, and basically anyone who shares their last name or happens to live on the same street.
Когда мы говорим о денацификации, мы должны понимать, что там есть как минимум три группы населения. Первая группа населения – идейные нацисты. С этими нацистами бесполезно денацифицировать. От них надо санировать территорию Украины вместе с потомками и семьями.
The logic here is as twisted as it is terrifying. If you resist our invasion, you're a Nazi. If you oppose our imperial ambitions, you're a Nazi. If you dare to raise your children with Ukrainian values, congratulations, your whole family is on the list. Bravo, Sivkov. With this line, you're officially a frontrunner for the Kremlin's most Orwellian quote of the year award. Expect your medal in the mail, along with a complimentary tinfoil hat. And with this, we conclude this episode of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.